Hello, everyone. My name is Diane Choi, Senior Officer for Green Investment Services Portfolio at the Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI. Welcome to today's event, Innovative Solutions for Green Hydrogen Value Chain, Powering Sustainable Net Zero Transition, part of our annual Global Green Growth Week. This session will be divided into two parts. Part one will feature presentations from our esteemed panelists, and part two will be a question and answer session with our panelists led and moderated by Mr. Nishant Bhardwaj. So before we start the session, I'd like to ask our presenters to please turn your microphone only when you're speaking and mute it otherwise. Audience, please keep your mics muted throughout the event. And this event is being recorded and will be available in our website later. So without further ado, let's begin today's session. Before our experts take the stage, we have a special message from GGGI's President and Chair, Mr. Ban Ki-moon.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the 7th Annual Global Green Growth Week. I speak to you today with a sense of urgency because our one and only planet is facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions. The theme for this year, Fast-Tracking Transformative Climate Action, underscores the grave and urgent situation. For many years, I have been emphasizing a simple truth about the climate crisis. There is no plan B because there is no planet B either. The opportunity to save the planet is not for the distant future. Now is the time. We need everyone to join and help tackle the climate crisis, and the policies and solutions need to meet the urgency and severity with boldness and innovativeness. The year 2023 was marked yet again with record-breaking temperatures and severe weather events. To keep global temperatures below the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold and avert the worst, we must act swiftly and boldly. Therefore, I'm proud that Global Green Growth Week brings together policymakers, thought leaders, investors, and innovators from the public and private sectors from all over the globe to discuss solutions to the climate crisis. And I'm also excited that there will be a special spotlight on young people and their pivotal role in a greener future. Much like the least developed countries and small island developing states, young people will be the most impacted despite having contributed to the problems the least. They therefore have every right to contribute to the solutions, and their creativity and passion will be invaluable assets. With the conclusion of the first global stocktake, discussions to operationalize loss and damage and other important issues, this year's COP28, which is just weeks away, will be critically important, and I hope the Global Green Growth Week will prove to be a helpful stepping stone to build momentum, hone ideas, and much more. The challenges before us are immense, but so is our collective potential. Let us seize this moment and work together to fast-track transformative climate action. Together, we can secure a safer, greener, and more sustainable world for ourselves and for generations to come. I wish you my best wishes for very productive discussions. Thank you.
Great. So let me now introduce Ms. Helena McLeod for the welcoming remarks. Helena is Deputy Director General and Head of Green Growth Planning and Implementation Division at GGGI. With over 25 years of experience ranging from renewable energy to climate resilience, Helena leads more than 30 country operations in GGGI. Now over to you, Helena.
Thank you, Dion. And I think our numbers of country offices are growing so quickly. We're over 40 now. So it's really exciting. And this world that we live in, it is, yes, in crisis, but why I love working in GGGI and in this sector is that I come across people every day who have solutions. And this is something we're all in. And that's why our president and chair's words, they're always so inspiring for me. There is no planet B. There's no plan B. And we have to come up with the solutions. Green hydrogen is not my area of expertise, but it's an area that fascinates me. And of course, in terms of the Paris Agreement, countries have committed to becoming net zero. And the challenge with renewables is that because of the variability, you still need to have that base load. Natural gas has come through now in terms of power plants as a critical way to complement that variable renewable energy. But it's a transition fuel because we need to get to net zero. And green hydrogen is coming through now as one of those critical areas to replace natural gas infrastructure because it can use the infrastructure and therefore potentially is cost efficient. Now, GGGI, and under the leadership of my colleague, Dr. Kyung-Nam Shin, our Assistant Director General, and Nishant Bhardwaj, who's on the call as one of our expert speakers today, they've really led flagship work across the globe in terms of GGGI in green hydrogen. And I'm really impressed by what they're doing, working in a matrix way as we do across the country offices. There's obviously really critical issues to making green hydrogen a success in the world. These include the enabling policy and regulations, having a regional approach and a multi-sector approach as well. There are resource demands that green hydrogen requires and ensuring that green hydrogen is sustainable in itself in terms of other natural resources. It really requires catalytic instruments like blended finance, which is one of the areas we specialize in. And obviously an industrial strategy to decarbonize and link to that long-term low emission development scenario that really works for the country and makes it a win-win, also for job creation as well. So I'm really excited to welcome the speakers within and outside of GGGI. I look forward to listening and learning from you today and continuing our partnership as we go forward. Thank you, Dion.
Thank you, Helena, for those welcoming remarks. Your words certainly set the stage for today's discussion. So now, please welcome Mr. Nishant Bhardwaj, Director in Investment and Policy Solutions Division at GGGI. Nishant brings over 20 years of experience working on renewable energy systems, power sector reforms, and green infrastructure finance worldwide. Now the floor is yours, Nishant. I think you're muted.
All right. Thank you, Dion. I hope you can see my slides here on the screen. If not, just let me know. I welcome you all, the participants, panelists, and the speakers in this session. The organizers have given me the responsibility to lay the foundation for next two sessions. So my presentation is primarily focused on green hydrogen global landscape. This is the content of my presentation today. I'll go from the classification of hydrogen to say why hydrogen is important, some regional analysis on demand and growth, some about the electrolyzer technologies, the latest development happening in the green hydrogen sector, some challenges and the questions that needs to be answered as part of this session. Just before I start, just for those who are new to Global Green Growth Institute, we are a treaty-based international organization focused on supporting developing and emerging economies to achieve sustainable, inclusive economic growth, what we call a green growth. Our position in countries is trusted advisors and development partners, and we are embedded in the member and partner governments in one of the line ministries within our member and partner countries. We have now 48 member countries, and we are increasing in number by day. There are 20 more countries that are in the process of accession. Our thematic areas are sustainable energy, sustainable landscape, and green cities. With that brief presentation on GGGI, let me get into the substance. I was told that this is a mixed group, so let me start with the classification of hydrogen. More broadly, hydrogen can be classified into gray, blue, or green. Depends on the feedstock that is going in producing hydrogen and resulting CO2 emissions. When natural gas or coal is used to produce hydrogen using the steam methane reforming process or the coal gasification process, the hydrogen produced is classified as gray hydrogen because there's quite a bit of CO2 that is emitted in the process. Blue hydrogen is similar to the gray. The only difference is that the CO2 that is produced is captured and stored or utilized. And in case of green hydrogen, the feedstock here is water. And we use water in a electrolysis process to generate hydrogen, and that separates hydrogen and oxygen, very energy intensive process. And the energy that is used in the process is a renewable energy, and no CO2 is emitted in the process, and therefore it's a carbon neutral fuel or carbon neutral hydrogen that is produced in the process. Why hydrogen? I think it is also important to recognize that hydrogen is a critical feedstock for chemical industry, especially in refining minerals, fertilizers, ammonia, and the urea production. Hydrogen has also the highest energy content by weight for compared to any chemical fuel, at least 3 times that of the gasoline. But what are the drivers for using green hydrogen is primarily that it is considered as the solution for decarbonizing hard to abate industries, the industries that I just mentioned, the fertilizer, the refinery, or the transport sector, or the iron and steel sector. Also that the cost of renewables are going down. It is becoming quite stable at $3 to $4 in many countries, and becoming green hydrogen is becoming more and more affordable compared to what we have, with what it used to be. The other important aspect to drive the green hydrogen production and use and moving towards green hydrogen economy is the energy security, because you use renewable energy and water, which is available within the country, and lead to energy security, less dependence on imported fuels, less dependence on import of batteries. You can use an existing infrastructure on natural gas by blending hydrogen up to 18% and use the natural gas infrastructure. So these are some of the drivers that is pushing for green hydrogen economy. Looking at hydrogen demand and growth projection, what we produce today is 90 million tons of hydrogen. 99% of what we produce is a gray hydrogen, which emits quite a bit of carbon dioxide, and 90% of hydrogen is consumed in refineries and ammonia production industries like fertilizers. What we have seen different studies, the one done by BP Energy, Hydrogen Council, and IEA. All these 3 studies are pointing to the fact that there will be a substantial increase in the demand of green hydrogen. By 2050, it is estimated that there will be 6x increase in the hydrogen demand, closer to 500 million tons per annum. It is also estimated that most of the gray hydrogen will be converted into green or blue hydrogen, given the push for decarbonization of industries. From the demand side, looking at how the demand would look like in different countries, China will likely be the largest single market for green hydrogen by 2050, 180 million tons, followed by Europe and North America, about 75 to 85 million tons per annum. Japan, Korea will have 35 million tons, majority of which will be imported because they have a limited capacity to produce renewable energy. Other regions will have put together 200 to 300 million tons of hydrogen demand by 2050. Moving on to say that what it means in terms of an electrolyzer, which is a machine which is used to produce hydrogen using water. What we need is an installed capacity. It uses electricity, so it is measured in terms of how many gigawatts we would need. We need about 4,500 gigawatts by 2050, which means $1 trillion worth of an investment just in setting up of the electrolyzers, which also means that it would need about 8,500 gigawatts of electricity, which needs another about $3 trillion by 2050. So overall, what are we talking about is a $4 trillion to be invested by the year 2050. It's a very capital intensive transformation that we are talking about here. Talking on the electrolyzers, now that this machine that we are talking about, there are 3 different types of technologies that are available. The alkaline electrolyzer, which is the most mature technology. The proton exchange membrane, or a PEM, is also mature, but not as much as the alkaline. And the solid oxide electrolyzer cell, which is still maturing, not yet there. The important part of this slide is to show that we are expecting about 50 to 60% reduction in the cost. Here, different technologies brings different pros and cons with them, but the reduction is very important because it forms a substantial part of the cost after the energy that is that forms the overall cost of green hydrogen production. And this reduction in the cost of this electrolyzer will be driven by the material substitution, the technology advancements, and the economies of scale put together. Unless this reduction happens, we will not be able to match the price of gray hydrogen. There are 3 anticipated waves of green hydrogen, which is in the near future, that's today, that is happening, in the medium term until 2035, and in the long term from 2035 to 2050. Depending on the relative attractiveness of hydrogen. What we see today, the refineries, the green ammonia production, the green methanol, and long-haul trucking systems moving towards the green hydrogen. In the medium term, we see that there will be more blending of natural gas, shipping, aviation, the medium trucking systems, and the freight, and the industrial chemical industry would move towards green hydrogen. In the long run, cement, iron, steel, and the other industrial heating, and the passenger vehicles would be a long-term transition will happen in these sectors using green hydrogen. So this transition will happen in waves, and that's what we think today, but situation might change depending on the technology developments in various sectors. Regional competitiveness, these are dollars per kg of hydrogen production. What we see is in US, it is the cheapest because it is basically supported. There is a policy support from the government, but in the MENA region and in the Chile and in Namibia, all these are very high renewable energy and natural resources rich centers, and that's driving the cost down. But if you look at India, Australia, the cost of production is still high, and we hope that over a period of time, these economies would also drive the cost down. This is just a list. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just to show that where all these green hydrogen projects are popping up. There are some 20 very promising green hydrogen projects. There are almost 300 plus projects just in Europe in the pipeline, but only very few are reaching financial closure because of multiple challenges that we will discuss today in this session. But overall, if you look at the value chain from electricity generation to electrolyzer manufacturing for hydrogen production, the hydrogen infrastructure, and the end consumers, the entire value chain, there are several bottlenecks and challenges in the hydrogen sector, like large amount of renewable energy needs to be developed and to be integrated with the production facilities. The pace of electrolyzer manufacturing is an issue. The cost reduction of electrolyzers, In the production side, the cost of production is still very high compared to its alternative, that is a gray hydrogen. The availability of water and the ESG, or the environmental safeguard, is an issue, and lack of skills and capacity. On the green hydrogen infrastructure, the storage, transportation, and distribution network that needs to come along with the production is a massive area of intervention. On the end consumer side, the willingness to pay for the green hydrogen and the pace of demand generation is also very slow because of less policy support happening. So these are some of the challenges that needs to be looked at. A few slides on GGGI's global program on green hydrogen, which is mainly headed by our Assistant Director General, Dr. Kyung Nam Shin. He is directly associated with all these projects and basically leading our green hydrogen program. The green hydrogen program in Indonesia, we are doing this project in North Sumatra, where this is the idea here is to start a pilot of 10 megawatt that we will work with the government of Indonesia, and then take this project to a gigawatt scale, between half a gigawatt to 1 gigawatt, depending upon the amount of electricity that is available. We have completed our pre-feasibility study on this project, and we are planning to use geothermal and hydropower to produce green hydrogen. In the initial stages, that may be very well for the export, but the demand within the North Sumatra region itself is so high that it can absorb the entire 1 gigawatt worth of green hydrogen if there is a policy support that comes along with that. We also have a green hydrogen program in Morocco, the largest phosphate reserve, but Morocco imports 2 million tons of ammonia. We are working on setting up of a 100 megawatt capacity green hydrogen project. We are working with the government very closely to identify a site and take that project up to a stage of reaching a financial closure and working with the fertilizer industry. We also have a green hydrogen program in India. This is in partnership with the World Bank. We are trying to establish an institutional mechanism to bridge the gap between gray and green hydrogen. And we are looking at ways and means that how institutional support can actually bridge that gap, which is the biggest bottleneck or the barrier to move towards the green hydrogen. We are also working to identify one project where we can bring in all that. We will put up an institutional mechanism as part of the pilot project with a large fertilizer industry in the western part of India. We also have a green hydrogen project in Nepal. Nepal has, as you all know, a very high resource on hydro. But again, Nepal has a very peculiar situation that it has it has 300 million tons of per year of fertilizer that is imported, but the demand is much higher, 700,000 tons. Huge amount of subsidies is paid. There is no fertilizer plant in the country, but has 18 gigawatt worth of energy production plans for in next 10 years. All that putting together is pointing towards creating an hydrogen plant linked to a fertilizer plant that can pay for itself. Very interesting project. We are working again with some of the multilateral banks in making this project on ground. We have more projects coming in Colombia and in Vietnam, which are in the process of getting as part of the global program as we speak. Now, coming to the key questions that needs to be answered here in this session. Hydrogen transition is expensive, as billions of dollars would be required. From where we get this money for financing, and what are the innovative financing mechanisms? How to ensure the long-term offtake of green hydrogen, how to accelerate deployment of renewable energy. We have this hydrogen to power to X infrastructure that needs to be developed, pipeline, storage, port, etc., for entire value chain to work. How will the cross-country collaboration can be made more effective? What are the steps that must be taken towards skill and capacity development? These are some very large questions. I'm sure that we can't discuss everything in this session, but I think this session, the coming sessions, the presentation and the panel discussion that we will have, we'll discuss some of these questions, and we'll try to see if we can find some way forward on that. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Dayan.
Thanks, Nishant, for your theme-setting introductory presentation. So now, next up is Mr. Dolph Gallen, Hydrogen Lead in the World Bank. Dolph brings 3 decades of international experience in energy and climate technology and policy. He currently leads the Hydrogen for Development Partnership and supports the regional and country engagements on hydrogen. Over to you, Dolph.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to participate in this important discussion today. And I will be talking about financing innovations to promote global energy transition and bridge the green and gray hydrogen cost gap. I will be talking about a study which we are currently completing, which will be released ahead of COP, and it's an analysis of how to finance hydrogen projects in emerging markets and developing countries. Something we've done in cooperation with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and with the Hydrogen Council, as well as the Global Infrastructure Facility. And that study has a structure with 5 components. So first we talk about the expected size of the industry. So we looked at a number of scenarios and projections for hydrogen, as well as we made an analysis of today's projects, business models, and the lessons you can draw from that. And what we find is that there is roughly the numbers that were earlier mentioned. So today, about 100 million tons of hydrogen produced every year, about 2% is clean. By 2050, that will grow 5-fold to around 500 million tons per year and should be entirely clean. And when I say clean, I mean about 2/3 green or renewable hydrogen and about 1/3 blue or low carbon hydrogen. In terms of the cost and the cost gap, so today's best lowest production cost for gray hydrogen is about $1 a kilo. For blue hydrogen, it's about $2 per kilo. And for green hydrogen, again, best case, about $3 a kilo. So the clean hydrogen is today more expensive than the gray hydrogen, and that is what we call the cost gap. And a second analysis we did is the amount of financing needed, investments and financing needed between now and 2030, and the financing gap. So our conclusion is that for the EMDCs, the investment need is around 100 billion a year, every year between now and 2030. And there is a financing gap, which is somewhere between 10 and 40 billion dollars per year to achieve the growth of the clean hydrogen as we have projected it. And in terms of growth, so we today roughly 2 million tons of clean hydrogen. We expect that that will grow to around 40 million tons per year in 2030, of which half, so around 20 million tons per year, will come from emerging markets and developing countries. And the vast majority of that will be green or renewable hydrogen. Then we did an interesting analysis about what are the risks that are hindering financing and mitigation instruments to overcome these risks. So we looked at around 40 risks, concluded around 10 of these risks are really critical, and they are in 5 different categories. The key one really today is the offtake risk. I'll come to that in more detail. And that is then followed by a set of concrete recommendations for policymakers and for financing institutions, how to apply these risk mitigation measures, how to reduce the cost of clean hydrogen, and what can be done in terms of the enabling framework and other factors. So, as said, based on the scenarios we looked at and based on the existing pipeline also, we think that there is a reasonable target is around 40 million tons of clean hydrogen by 2030. You see that that number varies widely from scenario to scenario. So maybe you've seen the latest IEA scenarios that came out today. So they have around 65 million tons of clean hydrogen by 2030 in the 1.5 degree scenario. But some other scenarios are much lower. Now, this hydrogen production is very capacitors are 1, 10, 20, 30. So for 1 million ton a year of production capacity for renewable hydrogen, you need around 10 gigawatts of electrolyzers, 20 gigawatts of renewable power generation capacity, and that means an investment of around $30 billion. And the cost for blue hydrogen are slightly lower, around half that what is needed for green hydrogen. But if you do the math, the total global investment needs is in the order of 2 trillion between now and 2030. And the emerging markets and developing countries need around 100 billion a year of investment. To put these numbers into perspective also in physical terms, so 20 million tons of production in EMDCs means you need around 100 projects the size of the NEOM project, which is currently being developed in Saudi Arabia, and which is the largest renewable hydrogen project under development. So the capital intensity is an issue, but also the bulkiness of commercial scale projects is an issue. The largest projects in operation today is around 400 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity, but the projects which are on the drawing board are many gigawatts, maybe even 10 or 20 gigawatts of capacity. And so the investment needs for these individual projects scale with these numbers and are multi-billion dollars. Now, what has happened in the last 2 years is not necessarily beneficial. First of all, interest rates have have risen significantly, which of course have a direct impact on such capital-intensive industry. But second, also the costs have not come down as projected previously. So I saw in the previous slide some electrolyzer prices of $1,000 a kilowatt, and that was the expectation a few years ago. But in fact, we're still at closer to $1,500 to $2,000 a kilowatt for alkaline and for PEM electrolyzers. So that high cost is an issue. And then the other key cost component is renewable power. And also there you have seen slightly, at least in parts of the world, slightly increasing cost trends in recent years for a number of reasons. So we expect that the cost reduction trend for these technologies will again pick up, but there is a bit of a lag at this moment. So the cost structure of renewable hydrogen production is dominated by two key components. One is the electrolyzer, the second one is the power generation cost. And so the solution is then also, part of the solution is obvious. You need to reduce electrolyzer cost, you need to reduce power generation cost, and you need to find technologies with a higher conversion efficiency in electrolysis. So today's electrolyzers use around 55 kilowatt hour per kilo. of hydrogen. There are technologies that can bring that down to 40, 45 kilowatt hour per kilo. So that there is a 20%, 25% savings potential. Also, we talk a lot about production costs, but in fact, there's also significant transportation and infrastructure cost that can be of similar importance as the production cost. And of course, that is then critical when you talk about long distance shipping of hydrogen. So you may have in remote locations very low production cost, but if that is at the same time linked with higher transportation costs, we lose part of that advantage. And a final point to make is that you need to look at hydrogen not as the solution for every problem in every sector. And the best example of that is probably road transportation, where hydrogen was for a long time on the agenda. But if you look at today's uptake, it is going much, much faster for electric vehicles than for fuel cell vehicles, because there has been more progress in battery technology than in fuel cell vehicle technology. So what can you do to come to a viable business case? You can, first of all, try to create a niche market, for example, by saying that by phasing out the use of fossil fuels, or by providing incentives for renewables. You can reduce the technology cost, either by reducing the unit investment cost, which I just mentioned, or also by reducing the cost of financing. And so that's where we very much focused on in this study, how to reduce risk and the weighted average cost of capital. And we looked at a large number of risk factors, around 40 of them, found that a number of them, around 6, are really critical. And some of them are more important for the early phases of project development, others are more in the later phases of project development. And that includes, for example, off-take risk. So you need to find someone at the moment who's willing to pay you for a long period. So we're talking maybe 15 years or more, price for a product which is more expensive. You need to have infrastructure in place to get the clean, renewable hydrogen to the end users. And there is a risk, is that infrastructure in place in time if it's not part of the project structure. And you need to have a license to operate. So you need to have the permits in place, especially environmental permits can be an issue. And also you need to have acceptance from the local population. At the same time, there are a number of risks which are important for the cost of financing, such as the policy risk, which is typical for projects in developing countries. There is the creditworthiness, the technology risk, and the EPC risk. So engineering, procurement, and the contract risk. What this slide shows you is the breakdown of today's hydrogen pipeline. It is split into different phases of that pipeline. So you have project announcements, you have pre-feasibility studies, front-end engineering and design studies, and you have the final investment decisions. So that's the 4 pillars on the left. And then they're split by where the projects are of a certain category. And so especially the dark, the central green one is relevant here, because that is the emerging markets and developing countries. And you see the bar reflects the absolute amounts. I should say these amounts exclude the renewables power component. So if you would include that, the values triple. And what you see is that emerging markets and developing countries have a very significant role in the announcement and the pre-feasibility phase, but it drops off dramatically in the front-end engineering and design. So there is good intentions, but these projects are not reaching the investment stage at this moment. There are a few projects which are in the final investment decision stage, notably the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia, which I already mentioned. There's a project in Vietnam, a project in India, and a project in Brazil, which are each in the order of 100 megawatts of electrolyzer or more. And on top of that, there are 2 projects in China that are operational. So we're talking 6 projects of a significant size that are operational in emerging markets and developing countries. So we did a survey of around 40 project developers and put together a list of 40 risks and asked them to prioritize these. And this is the result. So you see that there is a very important risk related to offtake. So the 4 first bars show you on the left, show you risks related to offtake, such as uncertain clean hydrogen market demand, limited credible off-takers, uncertainty about the price, and lack of existing hydrogen trading markets. So offtake is the #1 topic to work on for this transition to happen. And then you see that that is followed by the political risks around infrastructure, about taxes and incentives, issues around technology performance and systems integration, permitting risks, and finally, what's going to happen to interest rates and exchange rates. So it's more of a macroeconomic type of risk. And so if you look at the project development in different stages, same stages as I showed earlier, you see that the risk is high, especially in these early phases, and declines as you go towards operation. Now, the critical phase here is this front-end engineering and design. The relatively high risk and also quite high cost. So if we're talking gigawatt scale hydrogen projects, this feed stage can cost $100 million or more. And so the consequence of that is that only parties with deep pockets are able to engage in this and are able to finance that. So the clear message for governments is make sure that you pick counterparts which have a good, a solid finance base, because that is critical for success in this capital-intensive industry. So I am currently in Chile, where we have our second meeting of the Hydrogen for Development Partnership. That was an initiative that started at the last COP. And the number of partners has since grown from 12 to more than 36, so more than tripled. And what the partnership does is a number of things and 4 work streams, but there is one dedicated work stream working on investment and financing. And so they've significantly contributed to this report I just mentioned. But for example, they're currently also looking, and there are so 3 other themes that are being elaborated around the technology infrastructure. Is one of these groups, as well as systems integration. There's one around policy and regulation, and there's a final one on socioeconomics and sustainability. And that last one is worth a few words, because that is really critical for governments. They're looking at hydrogen, especially export hydrogen projects, as a potential source for new economic activity and jobs. and is a key part for any discussion around hydrogen project development in emerging markets and developing countries. And there is more work needed to fully understand how to design the projects and what is the potential to really create socioeconomic benefits. And that concludes my remarks. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dolf, for sharing your insights, technical and informative. Following Dolf, we have Ms. Joanna Kay, General Manager for Zero Carbon Hydrogen Australia. Joanna is a passionate advocate for renewable energy and sustainable development with diverse expertise across Australia, China, and India. The floor is yours, Joanna.
Thank you so much for having me here today. And Helena, thank you for welcoming us all this morning, Nishant and Golf, for your valuable insights into the hydrogen industry globally, but also to really create a bit of a platform and a launching pad, I guess, to the next presentation. Also, GGI, great timely event to host, particularly before COP. So I commend you on that as well. So today, I think we find ourselves at a remarkable journey in the world of renewable energy. Governments across the globe are embarking on this exciting journey of discovery, driven by the potential of renewable hydrogen. It's a journey that promises to reshape our future and create opportunities that once were perhaps considered unattainable. And today I'll explore two compelling narratives, from the sun-kissed land of Australia to the vast expanse of the United States. I'll be talking about the concept of hydrogen hubs and how this policy is being put into practice and creating a hydrogen economy. Before I begin, though, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I am presenting on today. In Australia, it is custom to show our respect and honour the First Nations and Indigenous Australians and acknowledge their connection to land, sea, and the waterways. I pay my respect to the local Kaurna people, and I pay my respect to their culture, to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Australia is often described as the land down under, the lucky country. We have a global and very strong ambition to become a renewable energy superpower. Australia is shaping a greener and more sustainable future through renewable hydrogen. Earlier this year, the Australian government announced a Hydrogen Head Start program. The Hydrogen Head Start program is a testament to Australia's government's unwavering support and commitment to ushering in hydrogen as a new energy source. An allocation of $2 billion in funding, the program is poised to propel Australia's renewable hydrogen industry. It is endeavoured to design a financial support incentive around resourcing to drive innovation investments into hydrogen technologies. It's not just an investment, but it's a catalyst for change, and it puts Australia first and foremost ready to take action to create a strong hydrogen economy. We're also reviewing our national hydrogen strategy. Australia was one of the first adopters to create a national hydrogen strategy in 2009, following Japan and Germany. Our national hydrogen strategy is a comprehensive roadmap to a growing and thriving hydrogen industry. It outlines key objectives that include reducing the cost of hydrogen production, increasing supply, creating demand. And it's all about fostering innovation and technology. It's not just a plan on paper, it's a critical element for Australia's pursuit for global leadership in hydrogen. I think it would be amiss to not mention the Inflation Reduction Act. In August 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act was introduced by the Biden government in the United States of America. This piece of significant legislation holds provisions related to a clean hydrogen tax credit, often spoken about as the most significant piece of climate policy in America's history. The incentive is designed to boost hydrogen production and is offering a tiered credit tax system. But it's actually more than just a policy, it's an invitation for investment. It's a commitment by the United States on their ambitious clean energy goals. But what the Inflation Reduction Act has done, it's created a ripple effect globally. We saw Canada respond almost immediately to create its own foundations to support a renewable energy sector. We saw Europe respond with a green industrial plan earlier this year, and many other jurisdictions globally responding to drive renewable energy adaptation and production. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about how hydrogen hubs in both Australia and the United States build into this policy framework that we need in order to create the hydrogen industry that Nishant and Dolph both talked about earlier. Australia is a country that has an abundance of renewable energy. So our ambition is aligned with our ability to be able to produce renewable hydrogen at scale. Hydrogen hubs in Australia are about collaborative environments where producers, users, and exporters converge to share infrastructure, to share knowledge. If you imagine hydrogen hubs as a vibrant ecosystem of bustling activity, they're designed to create growth within a hydrogen industry, and they do so using three key objectives. The first, lowering production cost. The second, promoting innovation. And the third, enhancing skills and training. By pooling resources and expertise, these hydrogen hubs aim to drive down the cost of hydrogen production. This cost reduction is crucial and a pivotal step in making renewable hydrogen accessible and available and a worthwhile economic pursuit. It's all about promoting innovation. These collaborative environments stimulate innovation in production and the use cases for renewable hydrogen. They foster advancements in technologies and practices, and they're a breeding ground for ingenuity. They enhance skills and training. They're instrumental in providing training programs to the hydrogen industry. A well-prepared workforce is crucial to support our sector's growth. These hydrogen hubs are strategically located in regions that are teeming with potential, including the Pilbara and the Kinwa in Western Australia, the Hunter region in New South Wales, Bell Bay in Tasmania, Gladstone in Queensland, and Port Bonython in South Australia. These hydrogen hubs are redefining Australia's energy landscape. It is a testament and a dedication to our sustainability, innovation, but also in development regionally. They're a cornerstone of about $40 billion investment by the Australian government to transform the nation into renewable energy superpower. If we look at the United States, a nation synonymous with innovation and pioneering spirit, it is now currently making headlines with a $7 billion creation of 7 hydrogen hubs. These hubs strategically located in California, Texas, West Virginia, and the Gulf of Mexico. They're more than just a financial commitment. They're a foundation of a burgeoning hydrogen industry in the United States, and their ambition is monumental. By 2030, they aim to collectively produce 1 million metric tons of hydrogen each year. This remarkable volume is a significant step in the Department of Energy's target of 10 million metric tons nationwide in the United States. But we must continue to ensure the hydrogen that we produce is renewable hydrogen. I think Nishant and Dolph both spoke about the challenges around renewable hydrogen when it comes to economies and the economic relationship, I think, and the cost of producing renewable hydrogen. But the reality is the more we produce it, the more costs will go down and the better it will be for our environment, but it will create significant economic returns and societal benefits. The US government's $7 billion investment into the hydrogen hubs is not a solitary effort either. The Hydrogen Hubs initiative makes industry actually match the same amount, boosting the total investment to around $50 billion in the United States. It's not just a sign of intent, it's a signal. It's a signal to private investors, both domestic and international, that the US government is dedicated to growing the hydrogen industry. And we know that strong public policy will be the key driver that creates investment and crowds in foreign money and investment into programs in Australia. It will create and grow the hydrogen economy globally. It brings together crucial private investment and capital formation. Yet the path to renewable hydrogen and its future has its challenges, and Dolph and Nishant both spoke about them. The costs are very clear. It's expensive to integrate clean hydrogen into existing infrastructure. The investment, whilst it is substantial, is only a fraction of what we need to actually create a renewable hydrogen economy. But it has significant benefits. Let's look at these figures. If we decarbonise the iron and steel industry through hydrogen-based direct iron production alone, it could cost the US $1.4 trillion by 2050. We do the same production in Australia and provide that critical processing with renewable hydrogen, we can actually reduce the global emissions by 7%. So yes, the cost is high, but the benefits are outstanding. And the hydrogen hubs narrative, it goes beyond investments. It's about a story of diversity. And these projects are as diverse as the countries themselves, both in geographical locations, but also in technologies. I'll give you a few examples. The California Hydrogen Hubs, $1.2 billion is all about harnessing renewables and biomass as feedstock to provide a blueprint for decarbonising various sectors, public transport, heavy-duty trucking, and port operations. The Heartland Hydrogen Hub, $925 million of investment, exploring diverse energy resources for fertiliser production, electricity generation, and cold climate space heating. These projects bring together a multiple of feedstock sources, an array of end users, diversifying the risk across different technologies. This approach allows for real-world testing of hydrogen outside of lab settings. In Australia, the Port Bonython Hydrogen Hub is a collaborative initiative between the South Australian Government and the federal government. It'll be Australia's first large-scale export terminal. With private sector funding, we hope it will be worth around $13 billion. The Townsville Hydrogen Hub in northern Queensland, looking at promoting green hydrogen as an export opportunity. We find ourselves in a new era of hydrogen and the use cases for what it could be. The Hydrogen Hubs model is about creating a policy environment and a way forward, a pathway to be able to deploy hydrogen at scale and create the decarbonisation of global economies. And it's an exciting journey. And I think as we take renewable hydrogen forward, we all can work together to be able to leverage policy, public policy, to be able to make the decarbonisation happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joanna, for your inspiring insights. So our third speaker is Mr. Gajendra Yadav, Director at Synergy Consulting. Gajendra specializes in financial advisory and risk allocation for infrastructure projects focusing on sectors such as power, water, and green hydrogen. He has worked on transactions worldwide, from Middle Eastern countries to United States. Gajendra, you have our full attention now.
Thank you, Choi. And first of all, thank you to GGI team for inviting me for this session. I just wanted to check that I hope I'm audible to everyone. Okay. So I think it was a pleasure listening to the speakers who were there before me, especially Sean, Rolf, and Joanna. And I think each of them touched on various aspects that are critical to the overall development of green hydrogen at a world scale and to achieve the green hydrogen or the energy transition plan that the entire world is working towards. What I will talk about is more in terms of the practical challenges that I have seen with the green hydrogen projects based on the work that I have done in various geographies, including Middle East, Australia, and we have worked with a number of clients spread across the geographies. We have worked with Korean clients, we have worked with Japanese clients. We also work with some of the Indian clients, Saudi-based clients. So what this session would be a more practical approach to the challenges that we have seen in the implementation of these projects and possible solutions that can address some of those challenges, if not completely, then to an extent mitigate those challenges. So let me start by sharing my screen presentation. So I hope my screen is visible to everyone. Okay. Thank you, Joy, for the note. So yeah, so the topic that I've been given is bridging the gap in green hydrogen supply chain, innovative approaches for project viability and bankability. So I'll touch on the three aspects that are there in this topic. One is the green hydrogen supply chain. So if you look at a full scale green hydrogen projects, then it has basically 4 components to it, what we call the upstream, midstream, downstream, the distribution, and the final use case. So in the first part, which is the production and storage, it starts with identifying renewable energy as source of electricity generation. It can be either solar, wind, or any other form of renewable energy like biomass, to an extent hydro. So once this source is identified, then we have to, the next key component in this is how do we transfer this electricity or these electrons from generation side to the electrolyzer unit, which is usually called the midstream. So it can be a dedicated plant, specifically allocated or directly connected to the electrolyzer unit, or it can rely on a grid, depending upon the distance between these two units. Then we have the desalination unit, which is essential for the electrolysis. Then we have a storage unit of hydrogen. Then we have next unit, which is an ammonia loop, wherein the nitrogen, which is generated by air separation units, which have been in use since ages. So this nitrogen is mixed with hydrogen, and the reason why I'm bringing in the ammonia aspect to this equation is that hydrogen works perfectly if we have to transfer it to a shorter distance. So that can be done through pipelines. But if we are looking for transport of the hydrogen across geography, across continents, then the most economical way as of now is to convert it into ammonia and transport that ammonia. So as of now, the world currently trades ammonia, and there are vessels that are already available. So transforming ammonia in its current shape doesn't require any new technological advancement in form of building of ships, and also we can use the existing infrastructure if we convert the hydrogen to ammonia for long distance transport. Then another key element to that is the shipping and the insurance industry. Now, this is one of the very key aspects of the puzzle, because when it comes to understanding the bankability of the project, the green hydrogen project is already perceived as a bit risky because of very limited number of projects that have actually started generation operation on a large scale. So it is still perceived as a risky projects by by various stakeholders, be it sponsors, be it lenders, be it advisors. So because of that, any additional layer of risk should be minimized, and that's where the shipping and insurance becomes quite important. We should be very careful on how do we manage this risk when we are going to develop the project. If the off-taker have their own fleet, that's the best way to go about it. But if we bring in a third party intermediary who's responsible for shipping, then that becomes a prolonged discussion on how do we manage those risks. Then moving on, we need port infrastructure on both sides of let's say, the project. One is wherein we are trying to export the ammonia, and on the second side where we are planning to, the import country. So in both these countries, we need to have an adequate port infrastructure. Now, there are certain geographies which have advantage to it. The geographies which have already been involved in oil and gas transport and shipping, or ammonia shipping for that matter, they have an advantage because these projects, they do not require significant upfront investment into the infrastructure development, and thereby it helps in keeping the project cost in check. So the geographies which already have this infrastructure, they are expected to lead in development of initial phases by the virtue of keeping the cost down. Then moving on to the next stage, which is the transport to the local industry. So it's one thing to get it to the port, but then one also needs to think about how to do the inland transportation, that is from the port to the industries or the factories that are going to effectively use this. So this is the you can say broadly the value chain or the supply chain of an entire green hydrogen projects. Now moving on to the aspects which have a significant impact on project viability. So if we look at so based on my experience of talking to various stakeholders, what they said is that these technologies, they have worked perfectly in silos. I mean, electrolyzer is 100-year-old technology, with first one being put in Egypt. Water, Middle East runs on desalination processes. Ammonia, air separation units. Almost every oil and gas facility has air separation units. Quite simple. Haber-Bosch process. So currently the ammonia is produced, the gray or blue water ammonia, it does use Haber-Bosch process, and then this ammonia is transported. So individually, if you look at all these technologies, they have existed for quite some time in isolation. They are very well banked. The risks are well understood, but what is the key risk that is perceived by everybody is that people don't know how these technologies will behave when they are put together, and they are quite concerned on the interface risk. And second part is that because of the renewable aspect to it, there is intermittent power supply as compared to connecting it directly to the grid, wherein the power is more constant. Over here, there is intermittent power supply because of the intense variability in, let's say, solar and wind, which are backbone of this green electrons production. So because of that limited knowledge, that is seen as one of the key risks by the lenders or by the financiers. Now, these risks are being addressed to a certain extent, and people have taken the approach of using or developing the pilot scale projects, wherein they set up a small 5 to 10 megawatt a project, in which the key objective is to understand the interdependence of these technologies on each other, learn the algorithm to optimize the operations, understands the challenges that these technologies bring. So one of the key challenges that these technology have is that the Haber-Bosch process or the ammonia loop, you need to run it on continuous basis. While electrolyzer, they can be switched on and switched off frequently, but you cannot do the same with the ammonia loop if you are trying to export the ammonia. So that's one of the key challenges. And then how do we operate this aspect of the plant 24/7 without relying on non-renewable sources? So that's one of the key equation. And some of the solutions to address this thing includes setting up a battery for few hours, because obviously if we install it for longer hours, then the cost is quite exponential. So that can have a significant impact on offtake price and the overall bankability. Or the another solution is that you store the hydrogen and use that as a source of energy. Now, all these options, they have their own pros and cons, and I think a lot of work is being done on this particular aspect to understand how we can come around this particular requirement and how we can still get the green certification for the ammonia or the hydrogen while meeting this requirement. The next key aspect that can have significant impact on viability is the regulations that govern the certification. So I have listed down on my screen some of the key certifications that are currently in talks with RED 2 and RED 3 being one of the leaders. But each country has come with their own set of certification. Japan has their certification scheme. China has their own. US has their low carbon fuel standards. Australia also has their own defined zero carbon certification scheme. So all these countries are coming with their own certification requirement. I think there is a need to be cognizant of the fact that we cannot have multiple certifications governing a project. The reason is that when the project is being constructed, it cannot meet all these certifications. And if somebody plans to do that, then they will incur significant cost. And what that does is that kind of narrows down the horizon of the off-taker that you can have. So one solution for this is obviously that you first find the off-taker, look at the certification part of that country, and then build a plant around it. The second part to it is that you take one of the most stringent requirements that is currently there, and you build a plant around it, and then you can potentially sell your product to all the players spread geographically. So that's why it's very important for government to understand that there needs to be some kind of coherence between all these certification requirements, and that will kind of enable the development of green hydrogen projects across the world. Now, there are certain very key aspects to these requirements, what we are seeing, which is like temporal correlation, which is basically the time difference that is allowed between the generation of energy to the use of energy. So the green hydrogen plants, they need to showcase that there is early correlation between the production of the energy and the its use in the electrolyzer units for production of hydrogen. So this is with an incentive to make sure that you are not tapping into the grid for developing this green hydrogen. The second key aspect to this is geographical correlation. What it says is basically you need to be within the same grid system. You cannot have a completely two independent grids and then claim that I'm using this renewable source of energy for the green hydrogen production. So that's another key aspect to the green hydrogen certification program. Then in addition to it, there are certain technological specifications which basically determines what can classify as green ammonia or green hydrogen. And then in the last, there is an additionality requirement. What it does is that you cannot divert the power from one source to these projects and claim them to be green. Basically, you need to supplement the existing generation capacity for production of the green hydrogen. So these are some of the regulatory aspects that have an impact on viability. Now, on the financial aspects, I think that has already been discussed in this presentation, both by Nishant and Dolph. So I'll limit myself on this. So I do agree. I mean, at this stage of these projects, given the cost differential between the blue and gray ammonia price and the green ammonia price, the importance of blended finance, I mean, we can't emphasize anything more on that. I mean, it is a must, it is required if the sector has to pick up. So we all are looking up to institutions like GGI to come in and lend the required support to the sponsors for them to take these projects from pre-feasibility, feasibility to FID stage. And financing, cost of financing becomes one of the very significant aspect of taking the project to this FID stage and looking at the overall impact on the offtake pricing. Now, moving on to some of the key bankability aspects. So from the bankability perspective, I think the pillar of these projects is having a robust long-term offtake with a very firm visibility on pricing. Now, I know that's a deviation from the current ammonia industry and how it operates, or the hydrogen industry, how it operates, because they are not used to signing long-term contracts at fixed pricing, simply because the blue ammonia pricing, they are driven by the underlying gas pricing. So there has to be a change in mindset on both sides, where the developer, they are more used to getting a fixed return coming from utility scale business. The off-takers, they are not comfortable locking themselves up for 15 years, wherein they perceive the price of the product currently high and expect that to decrease as they move forward. So it can have an impact on their competitiveness in the game in the long term. So this is one of the key gap that exists between the developers and the off-taker mindset, and that has to be bridged for any project to be successful. Like I said, the importance of a robust off-take cannot be understated in these projects, and they form the pillar of anybody moving ahead with the project. Now, in addition to it, I mean, pricing is one of the key concerns, like you said. So from the developer perspective, in order to get a more favorable financing terms, a higher leverage, a better DSCR, the price visibility becomes quite important, because as of now, there is no spot market for sales of green ammonia, so or hydrogen for the matter. So we need to rely on having a more firm visibility on both the volume as well as the pricing aspects, to make sure that we get best financing possible, both in terms of tenor, DSCR, and leverage, and the margins. Now, the next key aspect of this transaction is structuring of EPC and O&M contractors. The reason why EPC is quite important in this project is because of this 4 to 5 different technologies coming together, from which have traditionally been in separate industries. So there are very few players who can combine all these technologies and give us a turnkey solution. And if they are being asked to give that, then there is a significant impact on the overall EPC cost for these projects. So this particular aspect has to be reviewed carefully, whether we go with separate EPC players and look to wrap it, or we go with one player and look at the commercial impact that it has on the pricing. And wrap is something that needs to be provided, given, like I said, as of now, the key stakeholder lenders and other parties, they're not comfortable with this interface risk, and therefore they want a credible entity with a very good balance sheet to stand behind those guarantees and those wrap requirements. Now, in addition to it, there are certain financing structures that can be brought in to make the deal bankable, which includes debt service undertaking or completion guarantees, adequate DSCR buffers, the DSRA accounts, the restrictions on dividend, and some financial coverage, which are quite standard for these industries, to make sure that lenders are protected to a large extent in these projects. Now, other key factors that impact the bankability is in terms of availability of land. I think this is where certain geographies they score over others. For example, Middle East, Australia, they have ample amount of continuous land. Most of them are near the ports, so that add as a strategic advantage to these countries, and hope these transform to us seeing projects being implemented and reaching FID stage. So I think other key issues on these slides I've already covered. So I think I'll pause here. I think my time is up. I see Choi there. So yes, thank you so much for being on this call, and yeah, I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you. Over to you, Choi.
Thank you, Gajendra, for sharing your insights on the practicality of green hydrogen. So our final presenter is Mr. Khalid Omidjoud, Managing Director at PSM Thomason Gulf. Khalid has over 20 years of technical and managerial experience in the power industry, holding multiple patents in gas turbine combustion, operation, and digitalization. I'll hand it off to you, Khalid, now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dion. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. Today I'm going to talk about some practical examples where we have effectively implemented some of our technologies into retrofitting existing gas turbines. Let me see if I can share. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Khalid, we can see.
Okay. All right. So effectively, title of the presentation is Technological Advancement, Retrofitting Gas Turbines for Operation with Hydrogen. But before I go there, first, let me just introduce my company, PSM Thomas & Gulf. We are owned by Hanwha. Hanwha is a Fortune 500 company, is one of the top largest conglomerate in Korea, with over 70 years of history and $61 billion of total sales, with 4 key sectors of operations: energy and material. That's the area where I'm sitting. Then we have aerospace, finance, and retail. One key element that I want to present is effectively the strategic overview for a path to carbon neutrality. How is Hanwha looking at this problem? Effectively looking into getting to net zero, looking at the full value chain from photon to electrons. So if you start from the left here, Hanwha has a division responsible for called QCell, that is supporting solar panels assets as well as manufacturing. IRA has been good elements for QCell as the leading supplier for residential and as well industrial markets in the US. Supported also by retail service by a company called 174, and getting into the production of green and blue hydrogen and storage, supported by Hanwha Cimarron. And then going into gas plant assets, moving into gas turbines and gas retrofits, where I'm sitting right here, along with Hanwha Power System for rotating equipment. So effectively across the value chain, as well as for carrier and storage with Hanwha Ocean, that's just been acquired recently, formerly known as Daewoo. Why the gas turbines? Effectively, in this renewable market, we're going to need some elements to balance the grid. And here we're talking about features that can load very fast, and also has the ability to run on multiple fuels, in this case, hydrogen, that effectively, with the excess in renewables, can be produced and stored. And then when the sun is not shining and the wind is not there, we could release that stored hydrogen back into the gas turbine to continue the green cycle. Gas turbines are machines that can load very fast and are very flexible, and can also be retrofitted specifically on the gas turbine on the combustion side with cost-effective solutions that allow operation carbon free. So if we think about the gas turbine as a large battery where we could release the hydrogen that's being generated when needed, it allows that ability to transition to renewable world and allow the flexibility. So effectively, the gas turbines can meet the flexibility needs and still go green. How we are able to do this, we can talk about 3 key elements that are required for conversion of existing assets to be able to run on hydrogen. And these technological advancements are first on the fuel skid. This is where now the mixing or the transition from the current fuel to natural gas can happen. So you can either run on hydrogen or mix with natural gas, which is how we actually started this operation, is running on a blend of natural gas and hydrogen up to 35% and recently up to 60. So this is the first element, is regarding to the fuel system, to be able to switch between the current stream of fuel and the hydrogen and or blend the two. The second key element is what we call the brain of the operation, is the auto-tune system. This auto-tune allows rapid sensing of the fuel stream and adjustment of the engine operation to be able to maintain stability and also maintain emissions below regulatory limits. So this system is what watches over the stack to make sure that emissions are below the limits, watches over the operation of the engines and all the parameters. And it has some self-learning algorithms that allows it to remember. So effectively, the fuel stream can vary, but the machine can still continue in operation because this is very critical with the current situation where the stream of hydrogen is not always there. The last but not least elements is the combustion system. And if we look here at the picture, you can see here, this is the gas turbine itself. This is the air inlet of the gas turbine. And the gas turbine is composed of multiple elements, which is the compressor, the combustor, the turbine, that are connected to the generator for power generation. The combustion system is where the fuel will be burned. And the current technologies are not able to burn the hydrogen effectively while maintaining the emissions low. Our system here, this premix combustion system that we call the flame sheet, has some technological advancement that allows it now to run seamlessly between natural gas and switch to hydrogen on the fly during operation, and still maintaining emissions stable. So these three elements are the key to converting existing assets to operate on hydrogen. And earlier this year, in a site in Korea, we have been able to demonstrate operation up to 60% hydrogen, meaning that we are blending natural gas with hydrogen up to 60%. And allowing continuous operation. Before that, we've been able to convert multiple units, mainly in Europe and the US, to operate 35%, up to 35%. The main reason here is that so far that hydrogen is mainly gray hydrogen, and it is located where power plants are located next to refineries. Effectively, these refineries have excess hydrogen that they can provide to the power plants that are actually feeding them with steam for their chemical, for the chemical plant. However, that content of hydrogen is not always there. It varies on a daily basis, and sometimes it's not there. That's why these three key elements are required, especially the auto-tune system, to be able to seamlessly transition between the different fuels and allow continuous operation without having to stop, because these operations are critical to be maintained and not to affect the downstream. So as I mentioned, we've been able to operate since 2018 up to 35%, that varied on a daily basis. And then earlier this year, we have been able to run up to 60%. But most importantly, we have been able now to demonstrate at a high pressure rig at a real engine condition operation up to 100% hydrogen. That means we can transition from 100% natural gas all the way to 100% hydrogen and be able to operate in anything in between, while still maintaining emission. And here we're talking mainly about NOx emissions below the limit, because when you run with hydrogen, there's no more carbon. So the only elements that we have to worry about in terms of emissions is NOx, while when we run with natural gas, we have to worry about both NOx as well as carbon emissions or CO2. And the advantage here is that effectively when we apply this technology, we are able to future-proof the existing assets to be able to easily transition into the hydrogen economy, effectively running on natural gas today. And as the stream of hydrogen is available, the operators could seamlessly transition without having to alter anything, effectively allowing a second life on these machines and not ending up with stranded equipment. And these conversion, when we talk about the hydrogen gas turbine, can be fed with either green or blue. Effectively, one thing that we like to see is this retrofit, or this technology is color blind. It can take in hydrogen. It doesn't matter if it is green, blue, or gray. It has been already proven on the gray hydrogen, but effectively it's still the same molecule. The color is depending only on the stream where it comes. And we show here elements of how it could be used with the storage ability to turn a gas turbine into a large battery, allowing future proofing of existing assets, basically with a cost-effective solution, allowing clean energy to be dispatched on a large scale on the grid. So just to conclude here, effectively the gas turbines are machines that are rapid, flexible for grid balancing, mainly with the now excess in renewables. We have seen this in US, for example, in California, with the addition of the excess of renewables, where the machines, these gas turbines now, because of the carbon emissions, have been shut down, but then they are required to come back very quickly when the sun is not shining on or the wind is not blowing. And these gas turbines have proven the ability to allow to balance the grid and be dispatched very quickly to alleviate these concerns. They also have the opportunity, as we have shown here, to run on multiple fuels, including hydrogen, which is a clean fuel that can be stored and dispatched on the gas turbines. We have proven 5 years of operations with single-digit emissions up to 35. We have now multiple projects in commercial demonstrations, one in Korea and a few in US, up to 60% in hydrogen. We have finally cracked the 100% hydrogen operation capability in a high pressure rig, and we are going for a full engine demonstration early next year. Effectively, my final takeaway here is that high hydrogen combustion retrofits for carbon-free power generation and energy storage are coming. Partial decarbonization has been already proven, and full decarbonization will be proven early next year. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Khalid, for introducing the technology and products for operationalizing green hydrogen. And thank you all to our presenters for sharing such valuable insights. So now we move on to the second part of the session, our panel discussion with our presenters. To lead us through this engaging segment, I'm delighted to bring Nishant back to the stage. Nishant, the floor is yours once again.
Thank you, Dayan. I think there is still the presentation here, Khalid. So if you can take off the presentation from the screen, we can have all the panel members With that, I welcome all panel members and participants to this panel discussion session. Today, we have a very esteemed panel with a state-of-the-art experience in the green hydrogen sector. Let me take the opportunity once again to introduce the panel members. We have Johanna Kay here. Johanna, yes, General Manager, Zero Carbon Hydrogen Australia. We have Dolph Gillen, Senior Energy Economist from the World Bank. Mr. Gajendra Yadav, Director, Synergy Consulting, and Khalid Amajoud, Managing Director, PSM Thomson Gulf. You just heard Khalid's presentation. Thank you to all the panelists for the excellent and very insightful presentation in the previous session. We have about 20 minutes for the panel discussion, and I'll go to each panelist with first set of questions. I would encourage participants to post their question in a Q&A box, and we will take them as part of the discussion as we go forward. Let me start by saying that the green hydrogen economy is largely seen as a robust solution to decarbonize mainly hard-to-abate industries, which would demand the reindustrialization as many industrial processes need to change and modify. And we as a society will feel pressure both from the cost side, concerns on jobs, and from the point of view of environmental safety. But again, striking the balance between the three, the D, the RE, and the V, we need policy and regulatory support. So many presenters in the last session actually mentioned about the policy interventions. There was some mention about the capital subsidies, guaranteed offtake of green hydrogen, mandate to the industries to decarbonize, or carbon tax. Contract for difference is another one. Green job policies, one of the presenters actually mentioned about that. These are some of the policies that could create the demand and supply ecosystem for green hydrogen. Let me go to Johanna first. Johanna, you made a very interesting point during your presentation on some of the policy aspects. The Queensland government is driving a new path for the future green hydrogen economy through Green Hydrogen Industry Development Amendment Bill and some other legislations. So if you can give us what are the key provisions in these legislations which will drive the green hydrogen industries and will help achieving net zero. If you can also share your views and experience of some potential innovative policies that can be replicated and adopted in emerging and developing countries to create this enabling ecosystem for green hydrogen at national and the regional level. Johanna, over to you.
And thank you, Nishant, and thank you for recognising, I think, the leadership by the Queensland government in their new legislation. They're not alone. South Australian government has released a Renewable Energy and Hydrogen Act recently. The catalyst for both of those legislations at the state level, but also at the federal level, is around creating a demand for renewable hydrogen, but it's also about creating a platform for jobs and skilling. So both of those legislations really unlock that opportunity to be able to do so. I want to talk about just three things because I am conscious of time, and I do want to hear from the other esteemed panelists here. But I just want to talk about three things that are really important as part of that policy framework, Nishant, that you talk about. The first one is really subsidies around production tax credits. So really bridging the gap between what renewable hydrogen currently costs and what people will pay for it at the moment. And we know that the subsidy will be significant at the start and decrease over the time of those offtake agreements. But we need that initial investment to be able to reduce the cost of renewable hydrogen to create demand. The second part is really around research and development. Research and development, we can create opportunities around workforce innovation. We can create opportunities around decreasing the cost of some of the infrastructure and the key electrolyzers, I think that you actually spoke about, Nishant, early on. And in Australia, we have this. We have this creation of unity over competition. And I think that's really, really important as each jurisdiction goes forward to create a hydrogen economy. It's so important that we're working together as this new industry emerges. And by that, I mean, we have an opportunity for us all to significantly create momentum. And I think we have to be cognizant of that and actually be aware of our role to do that. And that really ties into my third point, which is international collaboration. And, you know, I've spent a significant amount of time, a decade in China, 3 years working in India as well, really gave me a really international focus, particularly working in an international organization, on what is possible through those bilateral and multilateral partnerships. And I think if we have bilateral or multilateral offtake agreements that build into that demand, or if we have relationships of technology and knowledge sharing and information sharing, or even perhaps migration opportunities for increasing workforce to be able to create hydrogen economies in these emerging or developing countries where there is great potential, then we will see scale. And I think if we really focus on those three things, subsidies around production tax credits, innovation and research to support the industry, and collaboration internationally as well as domestically across multiple jurisdictions, we'll see significant growth in the hydrogen economy.
Thank you, Johanna. I think that's a very powerful message from your side, and I see that how important is international collaboration in case of green hydrogen, because economies that don't have the capacity to produce renewable energy but have large targets would work on international cooperation. Thank you for sharing your views. Let me then go to Dolf here. Dolf, thank you for very interesting and insightful presentation, and congratulations for developing this report that will be launched in the COP. Please send us a copy or a link when it is released. We'll be very happy to get the insight from this research that you have done. But during your presentation, you actually made a very interesting point. You quantified that 1 million ton per year of hydrogen production would need a 30 billion ton, very broadly, not talking about the whole value chain, but just from the production point of view. So that makes financing a very important part of scaling up green hydrogen production, considering the cost elements and the risks that are associated, such as the offtake risk that Gajendra also talked about, and also when it comes to the currency risk, what financing innovations and mechanism that can be used to catalyze the concessional and climate finance resources and mobilize private sector investment, mainly to bridge, to start with this, between the price gap between gray and green hydrogen. Over to you, Dolf.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that question. There is one important mechanism which at the moment gets quite a lot of attention. It's called H2 Global. It's a double auction, so an auction on the supply side and an auction on the demand side. It was established by Germany, but by now the Dutch are also contributing into that, and on a European level they're thinking about that. It's a mechanism where in this case a sovereign, so the government of Germany, guarantees the offtake establishes which is the lowest cost supplier, so that there's a tendering process, and then guarantees the offtake at that agreed price for 10 years. So that is one way how that gap can be closed. The problem is it's a quite expensive policy. So the funding available to H2 Global at the moment is in the order of 6 billion, I think, including new German funding that's coming. So if a million ton a year costs is an investment of 30 billion, that means you have sufficient money for 0.2 million tons. So, and we need 20 million tons in 2030. So we need also other mechanisms. We need to look into also the potential for national markets. There are some interesting opportunities. For example, ammonia and nitrogen fertilizers are relatively expensive in India, or at least are heavily subsidized in India. So if you have a market like that, then it may be easier to consider hydrogen and ammonia production at a somewhat higher cost, independent of natural gas. And there are similar cases for inland African countries like Zambia and Uganda, etc., are currently looking at that. So these are options, and then of course, I mean, I briefly mentioned this issue of that you can governments can create niche markets. So at a European level, there's new policy that a certain percentage of industrial hydrogen use in 2030 needs to be renewable. There is policy for that around 1% of aviation fuel needs to be e-fuel by 2030. Similar policy for all transportation fuels. So once you have such policies in place, then there is demand, and that is bankable demand, and on which basis you can develop projects. So, but at the same time, of course, we need to ensure that the cost of these technologies continue to decrease, and that the cost gap quickly closes. Another way of doing that is raising the cost of carbon so that the conventional production cost increase. So probably you need a combination of all of these measures to really accelerate deployment.
Thank you, Dolf. Yes, I think your conclusion that we need a combination of things to bridge that gap between gray and green hydrogen. We have a very interesting project going on in partnership with the World Bank in India, looking at how do we bridge the gap between gray and green. IFC and MEGA is also part of it. We came to a conclusion that we cannot do GS2 global type policy mechanism in countries like India, where the financial resources are quite limited. But then the other option could be to create an institutional mechanism like the one that happened in the case of solar that could actually absorb the cost. The Gajendra mentioned in his presentation that the off-takers are not ready to give a long-term off-take, but there has to be a mechanism in between that can absorb the shock and then see how to absorb this difference between gray and green on a long-term basis without really loading any of the parties that are involved in the transaction. So very interesting, Dolf. Thank you for your insight on that. Let me then move on to Gajendra. Very interesting presentation, your insight on being practically delivering some projects on ground and trying to close some transactions with your clients. One of the key factors that impedes green hydrogen project development is the risk associated with continuous supply and offtake, as you mentioned. While some of the risk can be addressed through the enabling policies, what Dolf just mentioned, but the impact is limited. Access to affordable finance is very significant. From your experience on green hydrogen project, what innovations, including risk mitigation and the insurance mechanism, can be adopted to demonstrate viable project and subsequently reduce the cost of green hydrogen? So mainly talking about the risk aspects and the risk management aspects, how much that could actually reduce the cost of green hydrogen. Over to you, Gajendra. Thank you.
So I think the first thing that comes to my mind whenever I talk about the green hydrogen project is how do we go about structuring the project from the very get-go? And that can have a significant impact on the overall development time that you spend and the amount of capital that you incur, including the final cost or the LCOE or the LCOH. So from this perspective, I think getting a consortium on the equity side is quite critical. And one of the key factors for building up those consortium is, one is whether off-taker can be part of that consortium. And the second part is if it can be from the countries which can bring in financing on the back of their participation in the deal. So these two aspects, they help quite significantly in terms of attracting a low-cost finance and in terms of mitigating the risk, because in the same entities on both sides of the table, there is a much more comfort that lender drives. In addition to it, the other key aspect of the risk in this project is basically the political and the commercial risk associated with the project. So as of now, since technology is not mature enough, so the commercial lenders, they are shying away from showing their full commitment to these projects. And they are looking up to institutions which can provide them cover in the form of political and commercial risk. So this is where ECAs become quite important for these projects. And also from the scale perspective, if you look at some of the geographies where these projects are being stationed, it is not possible for commercial lenders to pick up the entire financing. So ECAs, they are required to do the heavy lifting, and with their additional cover, we have seen that commercial lenders, they are quite comfortable then joining it, because that takes significant portion away from them. In addition to it, like I said, I mean, a part also needs to be done from the sponsor side. And coming back to the structuring point, the EPC, which I earlier touched upon, it can have the potential to, kind of change the overall financing parameters for the deal. So be very cautious when you work around the EPC aspects of the deal. And two solutions to that is either you kind of tender the components on initially and look at a wrap, or you find a player who can give you a comfort of turnkey solution. Both these solutions will work, but there are pros and cons. So you need to understand your strengths and try and fit in the overall solution gambit to understand where does it lie. And the next part that I'll touch upon is in terms of the support that sponsors can bring in from their side in terms of the completion guarantees or DSUs, which are quite common to oil and gas industries. So we have seen that the sponsor are a bit shy from giving these kind of support to the projects, but they become inherent key bankability aspects from the lender perspective. So the sooner a sponsor or developer understand that there might be balance sheet support that is needed for a limited period, the easier it makes the discussion and fast tracks the development of the project. So these are 4 or 5 key things I think which when work properly from the very get-go, that can expedite the project, and the chances of success increases significantly. Because as of now, it's a beauty parade of a project that is out there, right? We see so many announcements. So if you have to stand out from the crowd, you need to make sure that you have thought through all these parameters when you go to off-taker or a lender. So these are the questions that they will ask you in the beginning. And ideally, you should not be spending 5-6 months to go back to your drawing board and then initiate second round of discussion. So if we do this homework, that increases the chances of success of these.
Thank you, Gajendra. And I agree that there are significant risks, and it has to be a very structured approach one has to take. We can see that only a handful of projects have actually achieved the financial closure. That exactly points the money is there on the table. It's not a massive amount of money that we are talking about. It's possible. The whole game is about managing the risk and giving the returns to the investors. So I agree with what you mentioned as few critical elements of achieving the financial closure in these projects. Let me now move to Khalid on the technology side of this discussion. Khalid, you mentioned about your technology. You are one of the front runners in bringing a technology that can convert an existing gas-based power plant into a green hydrogen power plant using your technology, and it can take the variable amount of hydrogen while it is taking. So basically future-proofing the natural gas infrastructure. That is what you mentioned in your presentation. We have seen in a lot of our member countries that on one hand, they have said no to the coal power plants, but they are going very aggressive on natural gas infrastructure development to balance the grid. the real concern that we have as an organization and advising our governments that you are creating another set of problem by going so aggressive on natural gas, moving away from coal, unless you future-proof your natural gas infrastructure. My question to you, Khalid, is that if we have to advise our governments that if you are laying the infrastructure now for natural gas, can you make them future ready, and what kind of investments that would be required to do that? And what kind of technological advancements are happening, and how ready we are to tell governments that you future-proof your upcoming natural gas infrastructure while you look for retrofitting your existing one. Over to you, Khalid, your views on that. Thank you.
Okay, Nishan, thank you for the question. I'll take it in two steps because it's a very large scope. I'll take it into the pipeline section and the power plant section. So if I start with the power plant, where is most of my expertise is, we are effectively ready there to future-proof these assets and convert them. These conversions are technologically advanced, but in practical, they are fairly simple. As I mentioned, there's three key elements. The remaining of the infrastructure has to be looked at, but most of the cases that we have seen so far, they require no or minimal upgrades. So we're talking mainly about the gas turbine, which is the largest capital investment. It's already existing. There's not much change there. We're talking about the combustion, and also the conversion can happen within a typical outage that a power plant operator sees. So it will not even have an impact to his operation. The other elements that we have to look at, especially for combined cycle power plants, is what their exhaust and the heat recovery system that's used for steam generation to operate the steam turbine. Some of these exhaust may require some upgrades as well, due to the addition now of the operation with hydrogen that has a lot more. As you know, the exhaust may be water or steam that will affect somewhat those elements that need to be upgraded, mainly the tubes, the heat, the tube in the HRSG. But most of the applications that we have seen, or the power plants that we have discussed with, we did not see the need to upgrade those systems. So capital investment wise, they are very manageable and very cost effective to upgrade existing power plant to run on hydrogen. And effectively, it offers it now the flexibility to continue running on natural gas. And as the hydrogen stream becomes more and more available and the cost getting also lower, they can easily shift. They are ready. And that's one of the elements in the US with the IRA. If you have technology that allows you to be ready to operate or decarbonize your asset, you also start to get credit for those. So power plant investments are limited, and these technologies offer very competitive solutions. Now, the second portion is the pipeline. Where is this hydrogen coming from, and the infrastructure to support it? If we are laying a new pipeline, then the problem can be taken care of at the beginning. But if you're using existing pipelines, it have to be looked at in terms of material. The hydrogen leakage issue is a main concern, as well as the impact of the hydrogen on some of the materials that are being used in the pipeline. They're not very compatible. And now if we're talking about upgrading the pipeline infrastructure, we're talking about potentially significant capital costs that may be required to go full hydrogen. If we're talking about small blends of hydrogen, in some areas of the world, this is already done and straightforward. There's no significant upgrade. But as we pass the 50% blend threshold, then significant reviews of safety elements of the pipeline as well as the material are required. And if upgrades are required there, then we're talking about significant impact. But going back to your question, some of the developing countries are looking into laying infrastructure and investing in natural gas. If the investments are upfront, these elements can be easily considered from the beginning of the project and allowing a long-term view, rendering the required investment fairly limited and manageable. So power plant, fairly easy, low capital investment. Pipeline, it would vary by the condition. It can go from simple investment to a very large one.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you to all the panelists for this very insightful Q&A session. We have a very important person coming in the next session, the powerhouse behind GGGI Green Hydrogen Global Program. But let me take the opportunity to thank everyone here and look forward to speaking to you in the other session during the Green Growth Week. Thank you all. Over to you, Dayan.
To wrap things up with closing remarks, let's welcome Dr. Jeongnam Shin, Assistant Director General and Head of Investment and Policy Solutions Division at GGGI. Jeongnam has extensive 30-year career in the finance sector, including roles at the Asian Development Bank and the Ministry of Finance and Economy of Republic of Korea. Let me welcome Jeongnam to the stage.
Thank you. I don't know, it's also a technical issue. I cannot see my face here, but maybe sound should be okay, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. Maybe something is wrong with the technical issue now. Okay. Very good. So, great. Thank you so much. The ongoing the energy transition is unprecedented due to its scale and profound impact on the established social, economic, technological, and geopolitical trends around the world. Hydrogen, until now, the missing piece of the clean energy puzzle, is likely to further disrupt energy value chains in coming years. Today's session, we have learned we have emerging technology, financing innovation, policy support being extended for developing green hydrogen value chain. I would like to thank you all the distinguished speakers for sharing their insight and perspective on various policy, regulatory, technology, and financial aspects of the green hydrogen ecosystem. Industry and project development experts such as Khalid from PSM Thomas & Gulf, Gajendra from Synergy Consulting have presented the climate technological advancement and innovative solution to make the clean energy transition economically viable and sustainable via project risk mitigation. Thank you. We also had an insightful presentation from Dolph from the World Bank and discussions on innovative finance mechanisms such as first, partial loss guarantees, blended public and private capital, among others. Such innovation will help in establishing best practice for the sector to make project commercially viable and further catalyze private sector investment. Thank you. This is another a new plan early next year. Another potential area for us to pursue. Joanna from the Zero Carbon Hydrogen Australia shares interesting developments happening in Australia and other regions. These provisions can be used to develop locally appreciated and suitable solutions. Thank you. All these amazing ideas and solutions have potential to address challenges across the value chain of the sector, achieving net zero energy future across multiple sectors. My sincere gratitude to all the speakers for gracing this session and sharing their opinions today. I now close the session thanking all GGGI staff who have worked toward organizing this session Thank you for being here with us and participating in this critical session. I want to thank you once again for the expert and participant for their contribution. Together, let's ensure that the session is not just like informative, but transformative. Thank you so much.
On behalf of GGGI, I thank all the speakers and the audience for the active participation today. For more details and the recordings, visit our website. Have a wonderful day.